say we're on page Chav Hey, Ella, 6 lines up of the page. The Alter Rebbe is discussing the Paltiel Yid. Paltiel Yid is fire, it's a piece of Eibishter. It's Chochma with Ein Sof. Chochma means bittul, Ein Sof means the power of the Eibishter, the fire of Kedusha which manifests inside the union of Chochma. So this Kedusha is bittul. This Klipa, which is Hav Alitani, give me. A Yid who's a Rasha is in Golus. What's Pshat Golus? Golus means that his Paltiel Yid is trapped, and if he wants to, he can't bring it out. Golus means when your person does too many Avedas, they lose their feel for an Aveda, and if tomorrow morning they decide they want to do a mitzvah, they don't have the power, they're desensitized, they're compulsive. And because a person is in a state of Golus, they forfeited freedom. In other words, they've become, in effect, a Klip. Says the Rebbe Ella. However, what makes a Yid special is as follows. Shagolus has said, this idea of Golus, that the Yiddish neshama can be trapped, and we can forfeit our will, the Bechinas Chochma, to the level of Chochma, Einayala is only lebechinas hamispashetes mimenu. The way Chochma comes into the rest of the body, benefesh kul, and the remainder of the body lachis to give it life. Aval, on the other hand, you should know that sheidish v'ikesh al bechinas Chochma, the root and core of Chochma, shebenefesh alakis, which is in the neshama, the way it is hu b'moichin in the brain of the person. Says the Alter Rebbe, you should know ve'ina mislabesh bezvush sak teklipa. It is no way the Paltiel Yid could be exiled. In the sack of Klippa, we talked yesterday about the meaning of the word sack, where you forfeit control. You cannot, like a person who's in a sack, they have no mobility. The Paltiel Yid by a Yid, the way it is in Chochma, can never be Golus. The Paltiel Yid by a Yid, the way it comes into the body, can be in Golus. The Shoy, maybe just leaving you lose control. But in other words, what's a difference in a Yid and a Goy? Yeah, a Goy can also be righteous. A Yid can also be evil. A Goy can also forfeit control. A Jew can also forfeit control. A Goy can have control. The answer is, there's a point in Yiddish neshama that as hard as a Jew tries to forfeit control, he never loses it completely, never exiled. It's only shin. It doesn't manifest. Bilvush sak the klip, and the sack garment of klip of Shabalev in the heart. The left ventricle. B'chinas Golus mamish in a state of Golus. Says the Alter Rebbe actually b'chinas shina b'shai. In a Rasha, there's a Paltiel Yid, and this Paltiel can never be forfeited. It can be asleep, but you can't lose control. Much of yourself, 99.9% of yourself, you can become a Goy-like. You could lose control. You could become Golus. This Paltiel can only be asleep, and therefore, it doesn't do its function. Because man shasukim, so long as they're occupied, bedaitam will be nasam with their reason and understanding, betayvas down the matters of this world. In other words, to say, kol's man goyishkeit attacks a Jew reasonably, you can kill a Jew, you conquer a Jew. The worst thing a goy can do to a Jew is confront him, is antagonize him. Melt the Jew, he'll melt into klipa, no problem. You be reasonable with a Yid, seichel with a Yid, you can take the whole neshama and golus it. With the Jew's neshama is trapped, he can't redeem himself if he wants to. There's one mistake that Goyim always make. Everybody made it. The Christians made it. The Muslim made it. They're nice to the Jew, nice to the Jew, nice to the Jew, nice to the Jew. And the last minute, the Jew refuses to assimilate completely. They go nuts. They get angry and start killing Jews. And the greatest resurgence of tshuva happens at that point. Because as long as you're approaching Yid bedaitim will be nasam, you can put him to sleep. You can golus him. Not put him to sleep. The Yid could lose control of his neshama. He shouldn't be able to do the right thing if he wishes to. However, when this Jew comes to a test, about a matter of faith, and what's the translation of faith? It's by definition higher than reason. When you touch a Jew higher than reason, what happens then is you touch the Yiddish and the Neshama, the Chochma point. What happens when you touch the Chochma point in a Yid? The Chochma point in a Yid never was in Golus. The Jew cannot forfeit his Paltiel on the Paltiel level. And what happens? It stirs from its sleep, and it wakes up, upayelas pulasa, and does its deed, bekeach havaya, with the power of Ein Sof, chamalubish ba, which is manifest in Chochma because of the bittul of Chochma. So if you're reasonable with a Yid, if you're rational with a Yid, you can put him to sleep. You touch the super rational Jew, the lamayla menaseichel Yid, avim teres, emuna, mesiras nefesh, fire. It can't be, you can't forfeit it. It can be sleeping, but it's not forfeited. And when you touch it, it's aroused. The Eibishter wakes up, ki yoshin, as though has been sleeping, havaya the Eibishter. And at that moment, this totally assimilated, cold, apathetic Jew, Islam had been assigned to stand up at the test, but Munas Hashem and his belief in the Eibishter. Bilishum, tam, vadas, without any reason, without any understanding, v'seichel and wisdom, musaglei, which is intellectually reachable to him. And the Jew becomes in one instant, nefesh, For kutzei shayud. He becomes sacrificial. He's willing to give his whole life for the tiniest little Indian in Yiddishkeit. Okay, lehiz gabe, to strengthen himself, ala klipis v'tayvas elam hazeh, over the klipis of this world. Beheter or be'isr. If it's a permitted taiva, it's not Hashem Shemaim, he doesn't want it either. Yesterday, this guy was eating treif and machal Shabbos and living with a goy. You touch his pintel yid, it's not the pshat. Okay, he'll die for avodah zarah. He doesn't want to eat a piece of cake that's not Hashem Shemaim. Because when the Mesiras Nefesh emerges, it takes over the whole person. That even though Shahurgul Bami becomes accustomed to them, when the Pintel Yid, when the Nekuda of Chochmah Shebe Nefesh, which is not Mispashetes Beguf, that's not Das V'Sech, but the Thak in the Madrega of Chochmah is aroused. What happens that moment? The Neshama comes out with all of its vengeance, the Limes Bami is disgusted by all of his life, the Livchalein, to choose for himself, is his portion and his lot. You know, there's 3 words in Chassidus that all mean Yechida. Chelik, Goydel, and Yerusha. All 3 are in Madregas of Yechida. To give his life away to sanctify the name of the Eibishter. Even though Klipas governed all of Kol Yama V'lo Yochel. Klipas, Tavis, were owning this man his whole life and he couldn't conquer them. Kamai Mezal says in Medrash, Rishayim Heimish Libim, Rishayim rule by their heart, meaning to say that a Rasha wakes up in the morning, he says, today I want to daven like a mensch. He has no self-control. He's desensitized. He's heartless and fearless. Mikomakam nevertheless. Kishabali Dei Nisayin. When this same Yid is tested, B'davar about a matter, which is emunah in faith by the Shem Echad and the Eibishter, that the root of emunah is the holy mountains, which is he bechinas Chachma Sheben Nefesh Alikiyas, the Madrega of Chachma. In other words, your half is the bittel, the Eibishter's half is the Ein Sof. Your Chachma, the bittel you have is the killer for the Ein Sof. When you touch the Chachma of a Yid, Shabam Maluba Shein Seiv Baruch, which Ein Sof rests, how they call that Klipas B'Teilim over time. The Klipas disappear. Your mamish lifting Havayit become like nothing in front of Ein Sof. Kediksiv, it says in the pasuk, and he brings 4 psukim. Kol hagoyim ayin negdo. All goyim are like nothing compared to him. Uksiv the pasuk says, Ki nevecha Hashem. Behold, your enemies, God. Ki nevecha, your enemies, Yevedu, are lost, Yispardu, are scattered, V'gemin, and so forth. Uksiv, and it's written, Ukhim is denig b'nei like melt, like wax is melted by fire. Yevedu, V'gemin, they should be lost. Uksiv in the pasuk says, Harim kadenig namasu, that the mountains melt like wax. First one is klipas nega, because that's like insignificant, and the last 3 are shalosh who's meisagami, because they're completely melting. It never has a footnote like this. Whatever Rabbi, let me remind you. In beginning in chapter Yud Ches, Alter Rebbe started talking about Avos Soteres, Pintel Yid. And he asked 4 questions. Sheresh Avazu, where does it come from? We answered that question on 46 and top of 47. It comes from the Kedusha, the Ein Sof, which rests in every single Jew. Where in a Yid does the Kedusha and the Ein Sof rest in Chochmah? In Yana, what is it? What is it has been the last 3 pages. It's a Muna L'mayla Mitam V'das L'gamri. It's Mesiras Nefesh Amal Mitam V'das L'gamri. It's a Yid's tendency to give himself away to the Eibishter without any Seichel Avana Vasago whatsoever, without any reason at all, without any Cheshboinus whatsoever. He gives himself away to the Eibishter. As is the case in Klipa, Kedusha. Klipa is self-centric. We find Yid nowhere to show him, because a Yid can forfeit his Neshama. He can lose his power of Mesiras Nefesh, and he can't get it back. It's called Galus. However, this that a Yid could lose his power of Mesiras Nefesh is in as much as a Yid is a das v'seichel, reasonable person. L'maylam and a das v'asaga, a Yid can never be galust, only Shina. And when the Goy makes the mistake of touching the l'maylam and das of a Yid, fire comes out. So this explained in Yonah what Avos Soteres is. Then we discussed how we inherited from the Avos. And the answer is we didn't inherit from them. Hashem inherited to them because He loved them. And now we're going to read the last question. Avos Soteres is infinite love. But a bird can't fly with 1 wing. Where is Yida in this whole scheme? Says the Rebbe V'hinei. This infinite light of Hashem, which is manifest in Chochmah. Again, Avos Soteres is the fire of the Eibishter, compounded by the fact that you have a bittul which makes you a keli for it. Says the Rebbe, the love is so strong that it automatically includes fear. Its power is great and mighty. So much. Legarish to divorce. To push out. The other side than klipas. They shouldn't be able to touch. Even his garments. Shehem. What does it mean, his garments? You won't even do an act of avodah zarah that you don't mean. Thought, speech, and action. Of matters that touch a moon in one God. The Hainu, in other words, what does it mean you're not going to let klipa touch your garments? That you're going to be Lamed bin Nisayin, overcome a test, limsa and nafshe, to sacrifice your life al Kiddush Hashem, afilu, not to become pagan, not to do a pagan act, To do an act that you don't even mean. Against the belief in the Shem. Again, for example, you don't believe it in your heart. Moreover, you won't even speak blasphemous words. Not to speak blasphemously, negatively, God forbid, against the unity of Hashem. You don't mean it. This person in his heart is thinking about the Eibishter. And the guy tells him, I'll kill you unless you bow down. So he bows down. The guy tells you, I'll kill you. So he speaks divrei dorten iser against the Eibishter. But he doesn't mean it. Like the Alter Rebbe knows. The Pintel Yid is so potent, you don't even do something superficial. Like the Gemara says in Masech Gittin, how the king throws the ring. He says to the boy, pick up the ring. You know what? You're picking up the ring. My Sarim should think you're bound to have a desire. That's the Kint name. This is the power of Pintel Yid. It doesn't even want to have the most superficial, meaningless association with Hepech HaAchdus. It says the Alter Rebbe, Bezu, and this idea is Nikli Dechilu and Nichel Berchiv. That comes from Yireh. From loving Hashem, you don't die. From fearing Hashem, you die. But the infinite love for Hashem automatically involves fear of becoming separate from the Eibush. It's a natural love. Which is the godly soul of, notice again the words, Yisrael as a cloud. It's desire and want by its nature. Is lidavik to attach itself, and its root and its source, with infinite line of the Eibush. That because you love, and you desire, or you will, automatically, you're awed and afraid by nature, from even to touch the edges of the impurity of God forbid. Because it's against the belief in one God, even though it's so superficial, the outermost garments, nevertheless you don't want to do it. Shem dibur, or maisa, which is speech or action. Believe amunah that any faith will have in the heart cloud whatsoever. This is the power of the Pintel Yid. So we see like this. Every Jew has a Pintel. This Pintel is a gift from the others. This Pintel connects us to Hashem super rationally. On the rational level, you can put a Jew to sleep, you can put a Jew in Golus also. On the super rational level, a Jew may be sleeping. But if you touch the irrational Jew, the Jew becomes a lion, and he's mesa nefesh for kutzei shel yud, for heter, taivas heter. Yesterday he did every aved in the Torah, today he won't allow himself a taivas heter. And the Alter Rebbe says, you cannot do that without fear. Is a raya that this is the chilu and nichel b'rechimu, and this ava, there's also yid.